Good afternoon. I see the room is starting to fill up. We're going to give folks another minute or so, and then we'll get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'avoir nous joindre aujourd'hui. My name is Noel Baldwin. I'm the Executive Director at the Future Skills Center, and it's a real pleasure to be here today with our friends and colleagues at the Dais, and to be part of this conversation about artificial intelligence and its implications for productivity, jobs, and skills in Canada. In just a moment, I will turn it over to our colleagues Viet and Vivian to tell you about the two reports they've released recently. I just want to make a couple of opening remarks, and I want to start by acknowledging that the Future Skills Center, which is located in Toronto, is situated upon traditional and current Indigenous territories that include the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And the treaties that cover these territories include the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes and the Upper Canada Treaties. The Future Skills Center partners with organizations and communities and across many territories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And wherever you may be today, I'd encourage you to reflect upon the history of the land you find yourself on. As I said, I'm Noel Baldwin, the Executive Director at the Future Skills Center, and it's my pleasure to start us off by setting the stage a little bit and laying out why this work matters to us and we think to all of you, and why we got involved to support these research initiatives. The Future Skills Center, our mandate is to ensure that Canadians are equipped with the skills they need to thrive in the workforce of tomorrow that's coming very rapidly. And we're committed to identifying and addressing the challenges and opportunities brought on by transformative technologies like AI, among other things. And so supporting research like the two reports that we're going to discuss today on AI's impact on productivity and skills is a critical part of that work we're doing. And we do it with partners like the Dais, who've got deep expertise in these areas. And these studies are filling important gaps in understanding how AI adoption is going to shape the future of work in Canada. And they also help us and organizations we partner with, including governments across the country, nonprofits, universities, colleges, sector councils, and employers, to make evidence-based decisions to support workers and employers in adapting to these changes. If we take a moment and think about the shifts that AI is already driving in workplaces around the world, it holds incredible promise for improving productivity, streamlining processes, and it also presents real challenges. For example, which industries and jobs are most vulnerable to automation? How do we ensure that Canadian workers are equipped with the skills employers are looking for in an AI-driven world? And crucially, what does success look like in an era of rapid technological change? The findings in these reports bring us closer to answering those questions. They reveal not only where AI is making an impact, but also where opportunities lie for reskilling and upskilling, especially in sectors that are critical to our economy. As we've all experienced recently, we can't start soon enough to work together to shape Canada's future economy. The research is about more than just understanding change, however, it's also about shaping that future. For employer, it highlights how to harness the power of AI responsibly and drive productivity without displacing workers unnecessarily. For educators and workforce developers, it provides actionable insights into the skills Canadians need to stay resilient and competitive. And for policymakers, it offers evidence-based recommendations to support inclusive workforce development, ensuring no one is left behind in the AI revolution. Ultimately, this work aligns with Canada's broader goal of fostering innovation while creating a future where workers and businesses alike can succeed. And as we explore the findings from these reports today, I encourage us all to think about how we can apply this knowledge. And together we have an opportunity to ensure that AI adoption in Canada isn't just about advancing the technology for advancing the technology's sake, but also advancing the people and our society and economy. So thank you for being part of this important conversation. As we go through, please feel free to use the Q&A function to put questions that we'll answer with our panelists after their presentations. With that, I'd like to invite Viet Vu, Manager of Economic Research, and Vivian Lee, Senior Economist at the Dais, to present an overview of their research findings. Over to you.
No. Thanks so much, Noel, for the wonderful introduction, and obviously to the entire Future Skills Center team, as well as a couple of partners that I see on actually the participant list as well. And so this work also would not have been possible without the partnership we had with Magnet, another organization here at Toronto Metropolitan University. And so I just wanted to send a heartfelt thank you to Magnet folks as well. But thank you, Viv, for sharing. Would you mind going to the next slide, please? Before we go into the work, I did want to spend a couple of seconds here to talk about the Dais and who we are. And so we are, just like the Future Skills Center, an organization within Toronto Metropolitan University. And what we do is that we are public policy and leadership think tank. And so what that means is we do a whole bunch of research, but we also mobilize that research because we strongly believe in the fact that in order to actually meet the challenges of tomorrow, we need the future leaders of today to be equipped with the right kind of knowledge, with the ability to responsibly tackle those things as well. We study a whole bunch of topics, but I often think that our work exists really within the intersection of three key topics. The first is technology, which obviously this work is situated in. The second is economy, which again exists here. And third, the third pillar that we do work in surrounds the idea of democracy. And so our work excels most when all three of those areas combine what AI means, not just for the economy, but also the democracy. But within this work, we are squarely focused on AI's impact on the broader economy here. And so with that, if you've advanced to the next slide, Viv, just a very quick overview on the two pieces of work that we're going to chat with you a tiny bit, talking at you here, before sort of inviting you and having a conversation with us on how these pieces land. So the two first pieces is waiting for takeoff, the short-term impact of AI and productivity, as well as right brain, left brain, AI brain, AI's impact on jobs and skills demand in Canada's workforce. And both of these pieces, we're hoping to examine the current impact on AI on two sort of units that we think of as comprising the economy. You have companies who are organizing resources, producing goods. How are they using AI? Are they actually seeing a benefit from it? And then we want to focus on workers who are the actual recipient, who actually have to use AI day to day, who might also be impacted by some of the negative effects of AI. And so I'll take the first paper and then passing it off to Viv to take the second paper. And so with that, we'll go right in within the context. Why we wanted to engage in that first piece of work, especially looking at the question of whether AI actually impacts productivity or not, is because we have all seen those bold predictions that has appeared everywhere in media, on your LinkedIn feed. You almost can't seem to escape it. And so in the next slide, I have an example here, which is an extremely bold prediction from Sam Altman, who, as you all know, is the founder of OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, as well as the newest reasoning model that sort of came online yesterday. He said that the child that he's expecting soon with his partner will never be smarter than AI. But, he thinks that there's this ability, this particular ability will be valuable. A very classic, clickbaity title. And hopefully Vivian will be able to tell you in a tiny bit what the exact ability will be valuable in this sort of age of AI. But we have all seen this bold claim being made. But we realized that we don't actually have much evidence for it, especially on productivity. Given the fact that everyone knows that Canada is in a productivity crisis, we don't actually know how AI will be impacting productivity. So through this first piece of work that I'm going to chat with you here, we're hoping to answer that for the first time in Canada. And so next slide, the first question that you might have, right, is, okay, how are you actually doing this? Is this going to be one of those where you're looking at, the percentage of AI and then do a simple correlation with the labor productivity, dividing GDP by hours worked or the payroll amounts, and do it in a correlational sense? What's really exciting here is that we actually used a causal framework, which means that we're able to actually tease out AI's direct impact on each individual company's productivity. And in order to be able to do so, we actually were very fortunate on a couple of things. The first thing that we're fortunate to have is our data sets. That comes from Statistics Canada's survey of digital technology and internet use, or as we affectionately call it within our office, SDTIU. That's a survey that StatsCan run every 2 to 3 years, and they've done 3 waves of survey now, that every businesses that receive that survey, of which each wave there are about 20,000 of them, they legally have to answer questions on that survey. And so response rate is super high. That is as high quality data as it gets. And it asks about each company's use or usage of various different technology classes and how they actually incorporate it into their business functions. And so really, really good on number one. Second is that data set, we actually connect it to every company's financial tax filings data. And so we know exactly how much they make, how many people we employ. And for those who are kind of worried right at this point about privacy, all of us who are involved in this research project actually had to get security clearance in order to have access and work with this data in a secure data environment that exists in University of Toronto. And so we've got super high quality data. Second, we also have the same company answering multiple waves of survey. And so we're actually able to see the trajectory of when the firm actually ends up adopting AI. Because in the just 2 waves of survey, we're able to see, oh, this company didn't adopt AI in 2019, but when they answered the survey again in 2021, they actually said, yes, we have now adopted AI. And so it's because of the fact that we're tracking the exact same firm over a period of time that we're able to do this causal work here. And so the second question you might have is, okay, but AI seems really new, isn't it? Like, how far out can we actually make this productivity prediction? And you would be right. We're only making this prediction about the short-term productivity impact. What do we mean by short-term? We're really talking about 1 to 2 years post-adoption here. And so we have, as our estimate shows, that adoption event takes place sometime between 2020 and 2021. And because of how tax filings work, which unfortunately many of you, just as myself, are familiar with, there is a lag to it. And so we have the tax filing up to the end of the tax year 2022, which is about 1 to 2 years, depending on the company, after you adopt AI. And so our findings should be understood, not necessarily about the long-term impact of adopting AI and productivity, but the very short term, immediately after adopting AI, do you see that immediate sort of productivity impact? And so now that I've bored you enough with all of those technical details, all of which are available in our fairly extensive sort of report that's on our website, we'll go straight in on what we found. First finding, we actually find that there's no significant causal relationship between AI adoption and productivity. This surprised me, and you'll see the graph in the next slide here that talks about what I mean. And so this graph looks a tiny bit complicated, but it's actually really, really simple. This graph obviously has the left side and the right side, and the top side and the bottom side. The left side means that you're talking about the time period where the company hasn't adopted AI yet. The right side of that dotted line means that the time period of companies after they have adopted AI. And each of those dots shows you the productivity impact that can be attributed to AI. And so if you're in the blue zone, that means that you're probably doing quite well. That means that your productivity has increased. If you're in the red zone on the right sort of bottom side there, that means that your productivity has sort of decreased somewhat. And those bars that you see, the only thing that we want to make sure that those bar isn't touching that 0 line, because that's sort of the statistical significance sort of line here. And what you see is that even after doing a lot of work and a lot of cheating, because we tested dozens and dozens of specifications, all of that showed that it was a null effect. That is to mean there's no statistical relationship. The only way that we were able to show any form of statistical sort of significance here, which is the result that you're seeing in this graph here, the result is actually quite ambiguous. There seems to be a short jump immediately during or after the adoption event, but then there seems to actually be a decline in productivity, which certainly was a surprising thing to me, but maybe after I take you on the next couple of slides, it won't be anymore. And so in the next slides, we talk about the first reason why we might see this, which is a thing that we noticed that the companies who adopt AI were already more productive than the companies who didn't adopt AI. And so what that means is a lot of the claims about the productivity impact that we see likely has to do with a selection effect. You likely find that AI seem to be useful to you because you're already highly productive. And so when you're looking at and comparing yourself to peers that isn't using AI, they might already be at a slight disadvantage to you in terms of productivity. And so even if AI isn't actually causing you to be more productive, you see this perceived difference between the productivity of AI adopters and non-AI adopters. In the next slide, I think that, which is sort of the conclusion here, but what we also come back to, right, is that we're talking in the short term here. It could very well be that AI continue to be useful to people in the long run, but it likely require a lot of experimentation, a lot of trials, and also a lot of failures. And so this, the way that we should be treating AI is not as a silver bullet, as many seem to have claimed in the media, that, hey, only if Canadian companies adopt AI, we will be solving our productivity problem. That might be true in the long run, but in the short run, at least, we actually need to create space for all sorts of experimentation because not all AI usage can be productive. A lot of AI usages can, in fact, be destructive or unproductive. And so we want to ensure that we are in the place where companies actually take a not necessarily a too cautious an approach, but know that the money that they're investing in AI can sort of go to waste at least a portion of it. But that's not a reason to not invest in AI because there's still this immense long-term productivity potential that's really, really important to see. And so with that, even though I would like to pass it off to Viv, I know that she has just told me that her fire alarm has gone off, unfortunately. We all, unfortunately, are familiar with working from home routine. And so I actually pass it to Graham, who will be able to take it for Viv for just a tiny second while the fire alarm settles here. And so thanks so much.
Yeah, this is just really unfortunate timing. How about okay, yeah, I guess my fire alarm is going off now, so I'll pass it off to Graham to present some of the findings for our next report.
Great. And one moment here, I just got to switch the pins. Apologies. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our report on AI and its skills implications. So one of the most common questions surrounding AI in the workforce is, will it replace workers? And the question brings a great deal of uncertainty and anxiety. And I think it's really too early to predict the full impact of AI on Canada's workforce. So there are clear signals that policymakers should be monitoring closely. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So we know AI adoption is growing rapidly. From 2021 to 2023, AI adoption among firms in Canada nearly doubled from 3.7 to 6.8%, especially among larger firms. Generative AI technologies such as ChatGPT have expanded the conversation of AI replacing jobs to AI assisting or complementing or augmenting workers. So I think there's really a focus on skills resilience and making sure that workers are equipped for the foundational skills that enable them to adapt to technological change. So in our report, you'll see that AI is likely to augment and automate different types of work, and this process will not be uniform across all occupations. So we decided to use an index to better understand how AI affects different segments of the workforce. And we use the data-driven analysis of online job postings and occupation classifications to understand who is more likely to be automated versus who is more likely to be augmented. So the first thing we use is an AI exposure index. And this measures how much a job.
Hey, Graham,
Yeah.
would you mind making me into a co-host just so that while you're doing the presentation, I've also got control of the room because I know you're a little distracted. Sorry for interrupting your flow here.
So as I said, we're using an AI exposure index. We can actually go to the next slide. Sorry. So we're using an AI exposure index. And this allows us to understand how much a job is likely to be affected by AI. And we add another index to the mix to understand how much among those affected will AI be assisting workers or augmenting work or replacing tasks, like automating work. We examined over 13 million job postings from 2018 to mid-2024 to track changes for different skills and job demand. And then last, we use a skills analysis to understand what skills make certain jobs more resilient than others. So by applying these methods, we're able to categorize occupations based on their risk and opportunities related to AI exposure and complementarity. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So we wanted to look specifically at high exposure workers. And this quadrant here is looking at those who are highly exposed and highly complementary to AI applications. What we can see here is that we have about half of high exposure workers in high complementarity positions. And these workers tend to be white collar or cognitively focused professions. What separates them from the low complementarity group is the extent to which AI requires a layer of human intervention. Let's say, this is due to greater need for these occupations to make critical decisions on safety or health outcomes. So some examples here would be a legal profession using a large language model to perform a summary of text or understand patterns in information, but AI cannot ultimately make the decision for them. So if we go to the next slide, I'll actually pass it back to Vivian to let her continue with the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Graham. So just continuing off with presenting what we see within the high exposure group, about 52% of high exposure workers, or about 29% of all workers, are in occupations that have low complementary to AI. And what we mean by that is that some of these occupations have tasks that tend to be more routine and do not involve as much human involvement as the tasks that we see in the high complementary quadrant. So among some of these occupations, we see here a lot of finance occupations, auditors, accountants, actuaries, economists as well, and even software engineers and designers, or software engineers and developers. And we know that things like ChatGPT and large language models are really good at performing coding tasks, but we still need some level of human involvement there in order to understand whether the large language model is understanding kind of what you're asking correctly, check for any bugs in the code. So there's a spectrum of how much human involvement would be needed from these kind of occupations, but ultimately what separates occupations and tasks in this group, in the high complementary group, is that some of the outputs within these tasks do not have as much kind of critical decision making or involvement in terms of people's safety and health outcomes, which is why we see these type of occupations here. The second finding that we found was that amongst the high complementarity group that are highly exposed to AI, they tend to be higher paid, as well as a higher amount of them require a post-secondary education. So whether that's a university or college degree. And what we found was that 98% of high complementary workers require a post-secondary education, whereas in the low complementary group, only around 2/3 of them require post-secondary education. And when we track the job trends over time and disaggregate the two groups by post-secondary education requirement, we do see that after the release of ChatGPT in November 2022, that the low complementary group that does not require post-secondary education does see kind of a declining trend in job demand. And while we can't confidently attribute all of this trend to kind of the release of ChatGPT and kind of the diffusion of large language models in the workplace, it does kind of track with some of the trends that we see over time in the US market as well, which kind of provides some impetus to keep monitoring this over time. And the third finding that we found was that tasks among the high complementary group tend to be more cognitive and non-routine compared to the low complementary group. And the low complementary group tends to have more digital skills that are more highly automatable. And as I mentioned before, require less critical decision-making and responsibility for safety and health outcomes. So the top 5 unique skills amongst these two groups, we see with the high complementary group that there are a lot of soft skills that require more decision-making and are less routine. So that's things like planning, coaching, patient care, leadership, critical thinking. And with the low complementary group, we see that there are a high amount of digital tasks that tend to be a little bit more routine and tend to be more computational. So things such as accounting tools, Excel, data analysis, etc. So in conclusion, we see that AI tends to benefit those that are highly educated, best compensated. So they already have kind of relatively better labor market outcomes compared to their peers in the labor market. And those who have more routine automatable tasks require less post-secondary education. In the high exposure and low complementary groups have kind of a higher degree of risk in terms of their tasks and potentially jobs being replaced by AI. And what separates these two groups ultimately is kind of the critical decision-making and responsibility for others that the tasks be involved in doing. And although we can't confidently say that there is AI-driven job polarization yet, so in terms of job polarization, I mean kind of the declining trends that we see with the low complementary group that do not require post-secondary education. It does provide a reason for us to kind of monitor the long-term trends over time to see kind of if AI really is causing this kind of shift and misalignment in terms of its job impacts. So I will pass back to Noel for the Q&A session.
Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Viet. That was great. Great overview of the work that you did and great work that you did. So I got a couple of questions I want to ask, and then we've got a nice queue of questions filling up in the Q&A box. I'm curious, just off the top, whether either of you or your team actually used AI in doing the papers. Did you use any of it for crunching some of the data? I was just thinking about the fact I actually used Copilot the other day to help me figure out an Excel formula thing that I was having a hard time with. So yeah, any part of this assisted by AI as you did the work?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the first stab at it and I'll pass it to Viv. And I'll intentionally make your question a tiny bit more complicated and spicy, which is that the answer is a yes, only because of what AI is, right? AI seems magical to many, but at its core, it's statistics. They are sort of statistical algorithms that takes in data and allows you to get insights from those data. So even as something that seems as complicated as ChatGPT, essentially is trained on a massive corpus of text that is to mean every single word that has been typed out on the internet. And then what it does is that given the input, which is the question you ask it, the queries, the conversation having with it, it tries to sort of output a word that is statistically the most likely word that may show up to that question inquiry. And so within that sense, a lot of tools that economists use every day, things like regressions, things like statistical inferences, even some of the tools that were used, the causal inference tools or some of the tools that Vivian used, they are at its core using the exact same knowledge and technologies that powers these AI algorithms. So that long, complicated question is, yes, we use technologies that are extremely similar to AI that often isn't really called that. Now, perhaps a question that you really want to see is like whether we use chatbots and then whether we see usage of chatbots in many of these work. So I personally don't yet see a useful role. I have been experimenting with a whole bunch of things. And there are a couple of ways that I see it potentially being useful. And one way that I can actually see a potential usage of these tools in research is actually in sort of text classifications. And so oftentimes, let's say you hold these roundtables, you want to sort of see whether a question belongs to a specific category. Oh, is the audience asking a question about methods? Is this audience asking you a question about the topic? And so you want to be able to really quickly tag and group these questions, right? That's a tool that a lot of different machine learning sort of algorithms have tackled. And I've actually found that sort of chatbots and sort of GPT-based technologies to also be really, really good at doing that text classification problem. And so that's one specific usage of these tools that I found it. But quite honestly, perhaps this is arrogant of me, but I still think that I can write better than ChatGPT. And so no words of the papers have been written by ChatGPT. But with that, I'll pass it to Viv.
Yeah, really well said by Viet. Perhaps I'll give a bit of maybe a more basic explanation or kind of response to this. But yeah, definitely don't use ChatGPT to write anything. So all of our reports are authored by us 100%. But of course, the definition of AI can be used so loosely nowadays, everything from a linear regression, just like some simple number crunching. So I think, to some extent, that could be really useful to help with coding. But definitely the majority, vast amount of kind of the work has been kind of constructed and designed and researched and done by us.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that it wasn't. You both mentioned GPT models, and one of the questions in the chat, I think some of the data hadn't quite caught up to the kind of public introduction of the GPT, ChatGPT and others. And I think the question was, do you think and how do you think the results would look different once the data kind of catches that and starts to show its impact?
Yeah. So this, I think, question, the answer differs depending on the paper we're talking about. And so I'll pass it to Viv when we talk about the right brain, left brain. In terms of waiting to take off, you're exactly right. The data that we have is sort of pre ChatGPT or GPT-based technologies, generalized pre-trained transformers or GPTs. We don't know. Now, what we'll likely see, just because we saw this ambiguous productivity effect, even for tried and tested AI technologies that has spent, 10, 20 years sort of refining its use cases, where a lot of businesses have been tried and failed, and we still see that experimental period to be important. We don't yet see any reason for why that would be different with ChatGPT. That's sort of number one. Number two, and this is the place where it could differ, which is that ChatGPT as an AI technology is very different from previous AI technology on one ground, which is that you don't need technical training to evaluate the quality of the output. Prior to ChatGPT, a lot of these AI algorithms would output a number, right? Where you kind of need to have a bit of the technical knowledge to actually interpret the results and see and judge the quality of it. But all of us know a crap piece of writing from a good piece of writing. All of us knows that, a human hand is supposed to have 5 fingers as opposed to 10 or 12. All of us know we're supposed to have like 2 legs ordinarily, but definitely not like 3 or 4. And so you don't need technical training to judge the quality of the output of these AI tools. And that I think is different because it actually, I think, allow for a lot of non-technical people to also experiment with this. And so maybe that experimentation phase could become shortened because so many more people can in fact participate in that process. And so on Vivian, I know that your research actually took into account the effect of ChatGPT in the measures. So go for it.
Yeah, with the data source that we used for right brain, left brain, AI brain, we were lucky that the data is updated every month. So we used everything up until the end of 2023, especially when tracking those trends year over year going back to 2017. So we were able to kind of understand some of those job trends after and before ChatGPT and other kind of AI tools came out over the past couple of years.
That's awesome. I wanted to dig in a little bit more on your finding around job polarization, the potential for job polarization, because some have actually argued for a number of years that this is a phenomenon that's been going on in Canada's labor market already, right? That really significant benefits have accrued and are going to continue to accrue to folks who've got more post-secondary education, highly skilled, and that workers in different skill sets are potentially going to suffer. I wonder, in the context of AI in particular, if you think that there are ways for some of the groups who you see having less complementarity and more vulnerability, to how they might think about addressing that, how policy might think about addressing that, to try to reduce the chances of polarization that can lead to other negative outcomes societally, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And a lot of kind of job polarization conversations around that in the past definitely is speaking to kind of automation. And in the context of AI, we see that kind of the job polarization is kind of impacting even those within that do have a post-secondary education, that do have kind of a strong kind of technical backgrounds working in professional occupations. But some of those digital tools are becoming kind of more and more, have more and more of the capacity to be automated. So as we identified in kind of the unique skills trends, some of those more resilient skills tend to be soft skills that require critical thinking. And of course, even within those occupations and tasks that are low complementarity, you still need a degree of some of those tasks as well. So perhaps understanding how to strengthen those kind of skills amongst those workers and tasks, and allow them to do kind of work that's adjacent to some of those tasks that may be more highly automatable through AI. Using those kind of skills would help kind of use a transition given these AI impacts on their occupations.
Yeah, do you see a link between the productive adoption of AI at the firm level and some of these issues around job polarization and the kind of skill transitions people need to make?
I mean, to an extent, right? And the extent here is, again, use of AI is not necessarily good. there are many silly ways to deploy an AI technology in a workplace. And we've all kind of seen it because this is not necessarily something that's just restricted to AI. AI is just a tool at the end of the day. And so one thing that I do think workers should be aware of is that silly usages and deployment of AI can very well hurt your employment and your job. We've all kind of seen the conversations that are going on right now, where a lot of designers and illustrators, where their work continue to trump AI art, and yet they're seeing sort of work drying up because a lot of companies who might not have that creative training, who might not be able to actually evaluate the kind of artwork that they need, let's say on a lot of marketing content, instead of paying an illustrator and their sort of specialty to rely on an AI tool, we're likely going to see the exact same conversation on translation, which all of you work in Canada continues to be a big focus point, right? When you're sort of conversing from an Anglophone context to a Francophone context, clarity and precision of language is really, really important. And so you always need a trained translator and an interpreter in some cases, because if you don't speak French, you can't know whether the AI tool actually translated your words in the correct way so that it actually lands affect in the right way. And so there is a lot of silly usages that might sort of unfairly hurt workers. And so a lot of these is also about ensuring that if you are at that level, that middle workers who are doing a very specialized cognitive skill, where a lot of silly usages of these technology can impact you, it's also about gaining that language to be part of this conversations, to figure out a way to impact and participate in that company decision-making processes and how they deployed AI. Oftentimes, my line when it comes to how companies should be adopting AI is ask your workers about the part of your job that you like the least. All of us have those things that we really, really do not like. Those are prime target for things like automation and AI to actually take over. And so I do think this is very much about ensuring that workers themselves feel equipped to participate in these conversations adopting AI, as well as sort of companies learning how to smartly deploy it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know you and I and Vivian and Graham have talked about this sort of offline. We've done some surveys of Canadians, and it's about last year it was about 3 in 10 said that they were using AI at work. It was only about 3 in 10 of those who said that they were doing it with any sort of direction from the firm, right? They had just decided, I'm going to start doing this. And only 1 in 4 had actually had any kind of training on it. So there's obviously lots of work to do. I wonder on that.
I do want to sort of a hot pursuit on that one point that you said, right? About I'm using AI technologies without the firm's knowledge. There's also a danger to that. Again, around data privacy and proprietary material. Everything you should be assuming whenever you use ChatGPT and let's say uploading a document to it, a schematic and an image, that they will use the stuff that you upload to train the thing itself. And so there is an actual sort of privacy risk, security risk, even sort of confidentiality risk that people who are using these technologies might be exposing themselves to. And so again, it feels as if a lot of these hype has meant that so many people have scared away from talking about AI because they feel as if it's only people that are smarter than themselves, like, the Sam Altmans of the world, can have productive points and thoughts about it. Where our view, certainly, I think I know it's FSC's view as well as our friends across the university and the ecosystem, like MacNet Diversity Institute, all of those great people, about ensuring that every single person knowing that they actually have something valuable to contribute to the conversation. So I just wanted to do that hot pursuit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it leads into the other area that I wanted to explore with the two of you, right? Which is really about, I guess it's sort of about the trajectory that we're headed in, right? I mean, even there's been a lot of stuff going on recently, but the whole DeepSeek model that seems to have spooked a lot of investors in the US. But I would relate that to other conversations that are going on about the environmental impact of large language models and this idea that there's some folks in Quebec called Hugging Face who talk a lot about this, but AI that's also kind of focused on a specific need of a firm rather than deploying the biggest possible AI. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. The question that I really want to ask though is, I think your work in the past, and I think it continues through this work, has shown that Canadian firms are not necessarily at the leading edge of adopting this stuff. Clearly, not at the leading edge necessarily of making the most productive use of it. And so, I wonder if our lag actually gives us an opportunity to think about the most productive deployment, the most ethical deployment, the most beneficial deployment of this kind of technology. And what does that start to look like when you think about policy frameworks or incentives? We in our work talk a lot about the capacity of SMEs to do training, right? And it is significantly lower than large firms. I think the same is true of technology adoption. And so we've got in our economy a tension between wanting to go quickly and be productive and drive innovation and growth, and the reality that we don't necessarily have a mix of firms that can do that easily. So in the context of AI, our AI workforce, and trying to be productive in the use of technology, like what are some things that policymakers should be thinking of, or opportunities to provide incentives in the right kind of direction? I open that up to both of you.
Go for it, Viv.
That's what we call in the moderation game a curveball.
Yes.
Because it's
Viv, do you want to go first?
Outside of exactly what you came to chat about.
Yeah, I need a little bit of time to kind of formulate.
In that case, I'll sort of buy Viv time and riff off as well. We'll see how coherent these answers will be.
I'm not going to hold you to it. Don't it's
yeah,
not
no.
going to be.
No, I think the key part, right, is we are still at a very early stages of AI. And I do believe that for a little while more, actually, the place that I'll start is actually often one part that I see missing from these conversations is about what is the right level, the optimal level of adoption of AI within the economy. What's our goal that we're trying to reach here? Because I don't think it's 100% of Canadian businesses using AI, right? That feels silly. I don't think I want to see AI whenever I go see, let's say, a musical or a movie, necessarily, or AI involved in making popcorns or making food, my sort of sushi rolls or whatever. And so I think we have to start by actually understanding where it is that we're trying to get to. Is it 100% within specific industries? Is it, a specific overall percentage? That may differ across countries because of different industrial compositions. The place that I think we start is by understanding that the benchmark that we have, which often is the United States, they're a little bit faster than us. And so there's an acknowledgement there. The goalpost, we don't know where. But regardless of where the goalpost is, it will look quite slow for a little bit longer. Because again, despite all of these flashy announcements, a lot of these technologies are really, really new. And we all know that new technology takes a while to find the appropriate space. And that process of figuring out the actual right use cases and actually ending up being adopted can take 7 to 10 years easily. Once it gets it, though, it will all happen at once. And so the question is, how can government ensure that 7 to 10 period process that we've just started here is done, not just, I think, in a careful way, but also in a safely reckless way, almost, right? Because to do all of these things, you do need to fail. But when you fail, there inevitably impact on people, impact sometimes on the environment, impact literally on other sort of societal values that we care about. And so it's about setting the guardrails. And as researchers, we know this world very well because a lot of research that we do is governed by research ethics. It's a set of principles, sometimes a formal application that says, hey, we want to test out creating and using this research tool. There's a rigorous evaluation on our potential impact of that research on people, on animals sometimes. And there's a set of criteria that says, hey, this research is valuable, but it's just way too risky. The risk that it poses on people is way too high. I don't think we should go forward with it. Or let's try to find another way that you can achieve the same sort of outcome by risking fewer people. I do think a similar sort of framework or language is needed here. And I know that, internationally, there's been some early conversation on this sort of last 2 years ago now, I guess. That conversation was started in Japan with the Hiroshima process about the ethical development of AI. Canada holds a G7 presidency this year. And I know AI will be a big topic of conversation on how this G7 could actually collaboratively develop this thing. Because this isn't just Canada's battle. Canada going at it by itself won't solve anything. It needs all of our partners in order to come together. And so I do think G7 within this case is a tremendous opportunity for the Canadian government to start getting started on what such a framework would look like. And so with that, I'll pass it to Viv.
That's great. Thank you. Vivian, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, that was really well said, Fiat. To add on to that, I think there are so many different ways that AI can be applied and deployed in various contexts that perhaps we're not even there yet and kind of understanding its full potential. And I think what we can do as researchers and kind of on the policy level is be agile to kind of help workers and businesses transition kind of in the wake of all this developing technology. So that requires kind of like a continuous understanding of kind of its effects across the economy, which is kind of what we're doing with some of the job demand tracking with job postings as well. Just understanding how AI has impacted the labor market in the past, how it's going to continue to impact us, and just really staying on top of those impacts.
Excellent. So there's a question here about the evolution of AI moving from large language models to agents and eventually AGI. And the question is actually around your observations of the evolution of how people use it as the technology develops. And yet you've talked a bit about that, right? That, I mean, there is AI embedded in all kinds of stuff that we use already, because as you say, it's about algorithms that are able to kind of compute what they think the next right thing is. But that's obviously changing. And I think, Vivian, this is also part of the work that you're doing, looking at the job market and where we see potential complementarity or vulnerability. So maybe I'll sort of cast it a little bit forward and say, where to from here a bit, as you've observed in the studies that you've been doing, where some of the trajectory is likely to be headed and how people are using it.
Now I'm actually asking you to go
you're
first.
quick.
Viv.
You're quick. Yeah. Okay. You're gonna make Vivian go first. I was gonna say you're quick on your feet, so you should do that first. What do you think? This can be.
Yeah,
this can also be in the realm of science fiction.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I guess the place that I will start, right, is by just stating a often an acknowledged fact, which is that artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is entirely ill-defined as a term. We continue to not understand fully what human intelligence means. If we do, the entire field of neuroscience would not exist if we actually understand how our brains work, how ideas get created. And so a lot of conversations about AGI often talks about this idea of beyond human intelligence, beyond human capabilities, where I don't think that's useful. I'll give you an example where that leads to perhaps a more useful conception here is copying and pasting things. We take that for granted. We can copy a massive block of text and with a click of a button, paste that entire text in a different space. People used to have to, if not use these massive machines, the typesetters, and then actually press the ink on like each individual piece of paper. And if they don't do it, they actually have to like manually and physically type multiple copies of something out. That is a process that takes a lot of time, that doesn't take a lot of time. And so one can argue that in the realm of copying and pasting text, we've achieved artificial general intelligence. we have an automated technology that does things way better and way faster than humans can. Mental math, that's another place. Humans have not been able to do mental math as quickly as machines literally since World War II. Like computers have been able to do mental math much quicker than humans have. And so that's, again, another area where one can argue in a very narrow sense, we have achieved artificial general intelligence. And so I do think a much more useful concept becomes what areas of sort of human activity can technology do much better at? And once you sort of realize this question, the answer has been staring at our face, not just today, but like since 300 years ago, since the Industrial Revolution. People are really, really good at coming up with new meaningless things to do. And I say that a little bit jokingly, but we used to not have many of these jobs that we do. We didn't need economists in society up until about the 1800s, where those people at the university who studied political systems and moral philosophy decided, hey, we now need to study this economics field because a whole bunch of other fields didn't need to be studied anymore. We as humans are very good at coming up with new things to do. And so because we actually do not fully understand human brain, technology will never be able to emulate something that the people that designed the technology still doesn't understand, right? And so I do think that very much this is about us continuing to innovate, continue to come up with new fun things to do for ourselves that also adds value to society. So I don't think I'm as worried as some might be about AGI.
Fantastic. Vivian, do you have anything that you want to?
Yeah, I think right now there perhaps could be some hesitancy around using AI for a lot of workers, whether that's just trust in the software, if you're using kind of like a public-facing ChatGPT, or whether you just don't really know how to use it and how it provides value for you in your work. Or even just kind of like old ways of working within an occupation, perhaps lawyers and finance people prefer to kind of like go through documents by themselves and kind of read over it to really have that kind of information click with them. So just kind of over time as kind of AI becomes more developed, you can have kind of more company specific software growth and sort of the trust in the usage of AI. And understanding exactly kind of how it is applicable for you, then we can see that the way that people interact with AI would change and it will become kind of a little bit more kind of a staple in the way that people interact with them in the workplace, rather than right now where it's still relatively new and people are still kind of figuring out whether they want to and how they would even interface with it.
Thanks. Yeah, I sometimes think people contain multitudes. We have both large language models and computational ones inside of us, and so we have the benefit of whether we're all sort of strongly skilled on those things or not. We've got the benefit of sort of having it all wrapped together at the moment. We're just coming up on our time. Viet and Vivian and Graham, I want to thank the three of you for sharing this work. It really does add important, new and thought-provoking contributions to the conversation. Viet, you've highlighted a couple of times the partnership that we have through Toronto Metropolitan University, where both of our organizations are housed and our partners within the university. I should also underline our partners at the Conference Board of Canada and Blueprint, who support FSC's work, and of course the Government of Canada, who funds it. This has been fantastic. I hope all of you in the audience have enjoyed it. You asked some great questions. We got to many of them. Those that we haven't, we'll take note of and see how we can respond to those. I really appreciate everybody's time. And we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.